She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. In a fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love, and I try to find the strength to know when she comes back to me again. I'm gonna come up from my hiding.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. And today we're talking about an ongoing missing persons case that has been highly requested, and we're talking about it with the hope that someone out there knows something, and they might speak up and come forward with the information that could bring 11-year-old Madalina Cojocari home safely. Madalina was last seen getting off her school bus outside of her home in Cornelius, North Carolina on November 21st, 2022. And on December 17th, 2022, Madalina's mother, Diana Cojocari, and Madalina's stepfather, Christopher Palmeter, were both arrested after they both failed to report Madalina missing for over 3 weeks. And their stories of how two parents could possibly not know where their 11-year-old child is for almost a month and not alert the authorities doesn't exactly add up as you'd expect, because honestly, there's no valid reason of why you would not know where your child is for 3 weeks and do nothing about it. But before we dive in to today's case, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Magellan TV. Magellan TV truly is a hidden treasure in the streaming world. It's the highest rated documentary streaming app on Google Play, and it offers the best value of any premium documentary streaming service in both price and quality. There is a lot of reasons to love Magellan TV. First of all, Magellan TV is about the drama of real life, and they have some of the best documentary series and films I've ever seen, whether it's in our genre of true crime or history, science, nature. They have great travel documentaries. I am really somebody who's drawn to sort of tune out on my time off when I'm not working, like put on something incredibly mindless because my brain hurts, and that's fine sometimes, but you know, for the majority of the time, I do want to kind of keep my brain sharp. So putting on a documentary series or film from Magellan TV is great because they're not only educational, but they're entertaining. Now, personally, I know I talk about this series all the time, but it still stands. One of my favorite true crime series on Magellan TV is Murder Maps. They've recently released a bunch of new episodes, and I keep telling everybody to go and watch it. Like, people are messaging me on Instagram and telling me what they're watching on Magellan, and I'm like, did you watch Murder Maps yet? So I'm so excited about these new episodes. Murder Maps is a drama documentary series which explores notorious murders in modern history. Each episode focuses on a different period, and they examine the forensic evidence found at the location. But because they have these like dramatic reenactments that portray the events, it's really easy to get caught up and drawn into the drama of each case, and you'll forget you're watching like a real life story. Now, previously there was only 3 seasons. Now there's 5 seasons, and the 5th season has 9 episodes in it. We got a 2-parter in there. We got 2 episodes talking about Jack the Ripper. There's an episode on the Cleveland torso murders, which, yeah, check that one out. There's an episode about Herbert Armstrong, who was a lawyer who was convicted of poisoning his wife with arsenic in 1922. So much more. You can watch Murder Maps and other amazing documentary films and series with a 1-month free trial of Magellan TV. All you have to do is click the link in the description box and start watching now. There's no contracts, no strings attached. You can cancel anytime, but I really don't think you're going to want to. Not only does Magellan TV have tons of great films and series, but they add 20 plus hours of new content content every single week. 4K's always included in your subscription, and there are no ads ever. So thank you so much to Magellan TV for sponsoring today's video. Guys, click link in the description box. Start your 1-month free trial now. Check it out. You won't regret it. And let's dive into the video. I apologize if my voice sounds weird or if there's a lot of jump cuts because I woke up this morning feeling very, very sick. So I look sick like in my eyes and my voice sounds weird, and then sometimes I have to cough. So there may be more jump cuts in this video than others. Let us say a prayer for my daughter Nev, who's editing this and who is going to have a very, very tough time doing so. A moment of silence for her. Okay. Let's dive in and let's go over the timeline to see how Madalina's absence was allowed to stretch to 3 weeks before someone did something about it. It appears the last day Madalina, who was a 6th grader at Bailey Middle School in Cornelius, attended school was November 21st, 2022. There's actually a video from her school bus showing her getting off the bus outside her home at 4:59 p.m. that day. She was wearing jeans, a white t-shirt, a jacket, and pink, purple, and white Adidas shoes. November 21st was a Monday, and reportedly, Madalina did not return to school the following day. However, it wasn't until December 12th that a school resource officer, Jay Nobles, and a guidance counselor, Mrs. Lampkin, made an attempt to visit the residence of Madalina. Now, I did the math, so you don't have to. That's 21 days. 21 days between when Madalina was last seen at her school and when someone finally showed up at her house to ask why. Now, North Carolina does have a compulsory education law, meaning children between the ages of 7 and 16 must attend classes at either a public school or a private school, or they can be homeschooled, but they have to be going to some kind of school. They have to be getting some kind of education. It's compulsory. Schools in North Carolina must notify the parents if a student has between 3 and 6 unexcused absences. Excused absences would be like, you're sick, you have a cold, you tested positive for COVID, or there's a death in the family, or maybe you got a family vacation or something like that. But if they just don't show up, the school has to notify the parents. If a student racks up 10 unexcused absences, the principal is brought in to meet with the family of the child and decide whether the parents have made a good faith effort to get their child to school. And if they haven't made a good faith effort, the parents could face criminal charges for violating the state's compulsory education laws. Now, not counting weekends, Madalina had missed 15 days of school. And let's even take out Thanksgiving, because I think Thanksgiving was on the 24th of November this year. Let's take out that. That's still 14 days of school. 14 days of school she missed before anyone showed up to her house to look for her. Now, I don't know if the school had spoken to the parents previously and the parents had claimed Madalina was sick. At first, I was like, I want to believe that this didn't happen because, the stories that Madalina Cojocari and Christopher Palmiter would later tell law enforcement, that wouldn't add up to the school actually being in contact with Madalina Cojocari at any time in this 14 or 15 days. But I did actually read an article where it says a spokesperson for the school district said they did talk to Madalina Cojocari a few times during this period, and she just kept making excuses, which makes her look incredibly guilty. I mean, it's not as if you were pulling a Casey Anthony and you were out looking for your child. If you were actively talking to the school and not telling them that you didn't know where Madalina was, that is an issue. And let's say that the school did talk to Madalina Cojocari and, she had all of these excuses, Madalina's sick or we're out of town for the holidays, whatever. Still, 15 or 14 days of school missed. Somebody should have done something before that point. That's a lot of days of school to miss. It's very suspicious. By this time, social workers and law enforcement should have been brought in to investigate. So when the resource officer, the school resource officer, and resource officers are like security guards, I guess, when the school resource officer and the school guidance counselor went to Madalina's home on December 12th, no one answered the door. So they left a truancy packet 2 days later, on December 14th, Madalina's mother, Diana Cojocari, called the school guidance counselor, Mrs. Lampkin, and requested that a meeting be set up in regards to Madalina and all the school that she was missing. And Diana said that she would bring Madalina to the school the next day and meet with Mrs. Lampkin with Madalina so they could talk about all of these absences and figure out what was going on. But on Thursday, December 15th, Diana Cojocari arrived at Bailey Middle School without her daughter, Madalina. Mrs. Lampkin called in the school resource officer, Jay Nobles, and asked him to come to her office, at which point Diana Cojocari informed both Mrs. Lampkin and the school resource officer that she had not seen her daughter since November 23rd around noon. But later, Diana would switch the script and she would tell law enforcement that the last time she'd seen Madalina was actually on the 23rd around 10 p.m. when Madalina went into her room to go to bed. According to Diana Cojocari, she and her husband, Madalina's stepfather, Christopher Palmiter, argued that night, and early the next morning, which would have been Thanksgiving morning, Palmiter took off and drove back to his family home in Michigan to get some items. Diana claims that around 11:30 a.m. on the morning of November 24th, she went into Madalina's room to check on her, but she found the girl was not sleeping in her bed. She was not there at all. She wasn't in her room. She wasn't in the house. And apparently, this didn't strike her as odd or concerning in the moment, because instead of calling her husband, Christopher Palmiter, to ask if he had taken Madalina with him to Michigan, Diana simply waited until he returned home on the evening of Saturday, November 26th. That's like several days of not knowing where your child is already, right off the bat. And just put yourself in her position really quickly. You know your husband's left and he's driving to Michigan, and you think like, no, maybe he took Madalina with him to have company for the ride, even though it's Thanksgiving Day and you'd think, you'd want your kids with you, but maybe he took Madalina along with him. But then you don't call to verify. You don't call to check up on that theory that you have. That's insane to me. Now, Diana claims that when Christopher Palmiter got home around 7 p.m. on December 26th, she asked him if he knew where Madalina was, and he said he didn't know where Madalina was. And then he asked Diana if she knew where Madalina was, because the fact that Diana just asked you where Madalina was isn't enough of a hint to realize that she herself did not know where Madalina was. And this is like what I'm saying. This story doesn't add up, and it doesn't add up on multiple fronts. It doesn't add up on like people, place, things, but just the conversations they're having or not having don't make sense. So Mrs. Lampkin, the school guidance counselor, and Jay Nobles, the school resource officer, they're listening to all of this, and of course it sounds highly suspicious. And of course the first question they ask is, why haven't you reported Madalina missing before now? Diana responded that she hadn't called the police or told anyone that she didn't know where Madalina was because she was worried that it would cause a conflict between herself and her husband. And later we find out it's not true. Diana actually did tell some people that she didn't know where Madalina was, but we'll get there. So Diana Cojocari doesn't know where her 11-year-old daughter is, but she doesn't want to push the issue because, your husband might get mad at you. That's a valid excuse. Officer Jay Nobles asked Diana to have Christopher Palmiter come into the school. He then contacted the police for assistance. Now, Palmiter told the police that he'd actually left for Michigan on November 23rd, and he didn't see Madalina on that day at all. In fact, he said he believed that he hadn't seen her for at least a week by that point, like within a week from the point that he left for Michigan, whether that be the 23rd or the 24th. When he returned on November 26th, Christopher Palmiter claimed that he asked his wife Diana where Madalina was, and she said she didn't know, which doesn't make any sense if you think about it, because we know that Madalina was going to school, regularly and had gotten off the bus at her home on November 21st. But Christopher Palmiter is saying that he hadn't seen her for a week, which, how is that possible if you're living in the same home? And then why would you not see her for a week and then suddenly ask where she was on the Saturday that you get back from Michigan? But in no point during the prior week did you ask where she was? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Christopher Palmiter goes on to say that he asked Diana if she had hidden Madalina, and she said no. And then he said that Diana asked him if he had hidden Madalina, and he said no. Like, these people are weird, right? Because they're both saying that they said different things to each other, but in the same sort of like variation. Like, I asked Palmiter where Madalina was, if he knew where she was, and he said no. And then he asked me if I knew where she was, and I said no. And then Christopher Palmiter says, oh, I asked Diana if she'd hidden Madalina, and she said no. And then she asked me if I'd hidden Madalina, and I said no. Like, it's weird. So their stories are different enough where it stands out, but similar enough where there might be a grain of truth to that part of the story. Now, at this point, Christopher Palmiter and Madalina Cojocari, both knowing that the other didn't know where Madalina was, did not call the police. Neither one of them called the police to report her missing, and this violates Kaylee's law. After Casey Anthony failed to report her young daughter Kaylee missing for over a month in 2011, a Change.org petition was started to enact something called Kaylee's Law, which would increase the penalty for failing to report your child missing within 24 hours of their disappearance or within 1 hour of their death. And this petition wanted to increase it to a 4th-degree felony. The petition went viral and gained over 1 million signatures, putting pressure on lawmakers around the country to design a law like this for their own states. Now, critics of this proposal feared that it would make overly cautious parents report their children as missing when they were just late or, not there, causing police departments to be overwhelmed. But despite this, several states did move ahead with legislation, starting with New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who passed Kaylee's Law in January of 2012. And at this point, 35 states have their own version of Kaylee's Law, and as of December 1st, 2013, it's a crime for a parent or caregiver to fail to report a missing child in North Carolina. A person who commits this crime will be charged with a Class 1 misdemeanor, and a defendant who's accused of concealing the death of a child under the age of 16 will be charged with either a Class H or Class D felony, depending on whether the person being charged knew that the child had not died of natural causes. Madalina Cojocari told the police that she believed her husband had put her family in danger, but she didn't know what had happened to Madalina. She also said that she had contacted her family in Moldova, which is an Eastern European country, and they had told her to call the police, but she had still hesitated to call. But, they didn't call either. They didn't call the United States Police Department in Cornelius, North Carolina, and report Madalina missing either. It's so odd. So according to the probable cause affidavit, Diana said that Madalina did not have a phone and her backpack as well as some clothes were missing from her room, but there were no friends or family members nearby that Madalina could have been staying with. When detectives from the Cornelius Police Department went to Madalina's home and checked her room, they noticed that there was an area in the kitchen blocked off with plywood. And when asked why there was plywood in the kitchen, Christopher Palmiter claimed that he was planning on making an addition to the house, making a separate apartment. On December 15th, 2022, law enforcement went to 18413 Victoria Bay Drive with a search warrant, and they removed 3 iPhones as well as 11 other items. On December 17th, 37-year-old Madalina Cojocari and 60-year-old Christopher Palmiter were arrested and charged with the failure to report a missing child. A judge set bail for Diana at $250,000 and $200,000 for Palmiter, and it's been announced that if the pair do bond out, they will have to turn over their passports to the court to prevent them from leaving the country, since reportedly they both have family in Moldova. Cornelius Police Captain Jennifer Thompson announced that investigators from multiple law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, were looking for Madalina, and they were out knocking on the over 245 doors in the Victoria Bay community where Madalina lived. They also conducted searches in and around Lake Cornelius just in case, but Captain Thomas said, quote, "We know everyone has a lot of questions. We also have questions and are doing everything we can with proper legal authority to get those answers. This is a serious case of a child whose parents are clearly not telling us everything they know." End quote. You think? clearly is right. On December 21st, the police returned to Madalina's home and removed more items. And although all the items removed from the house have been redacted in the documents, it's believed that law enforcement recovered at least 40 items. And from the initial search warrant, we know that they were looking for cell phone records, text messages, GPS locations, documents, hair, bodily fluid, blood, and anything that might suggest a crime had been committed. Between the time that Madalina was last seen and when she was reported missing, some strange things happened. Neighbors reported seeing flames and smoke coming from the yard of Madalina's home 2 weeks before she was reported missing, and a few of them called the fire department, who did respond to the address. One neighbor claimed that the fire wouldn't have stuck out that much and it wasn't that big of a deal at the time, but now, given the timing of Madalina's disappearance, it seems much more nefarious. And this neighbor said, quote, "If you don't know the context that a girl was missing, it's kind of a nothing burger of a call. At the time, it was more of a fire safety or permit type issue," end quote. So basically they're saying, we don't care if they have a fire. We just called because, we were scared that they weren't being safe. But now that we know Madalina was missing at that time, it seems very suspicious, which it does. Cornelius Fire Chief Gary Barbie acknowledged that the fire had happened and that the fire department had responded to that address, but he would not give further details due to the ongoing investigation. And apparently, the family of Madalina were seen by neighbors lighting a fire in the yard and burning couch cushions, and police, along with FBI agents, later searched the yard for evidence, with one neighbor saying the law enforcement agents spent hours outside. Quote, "They took all kinds of samples from the fire pit area. I guess they were trying to figure out if they burned anything of substance there," end quote. On top of that, it looked as if Christopher Palmiter wasn't the only one taking trips while Madalina was missing, because new information reveals that Diana Cojocari left home after Madalina went missing and before she reported her missing. And Diana drove her Toyota Prius to western North Carolina, specifically to Madison County on the Tennessee border near the Appalachian Mountains. On January 6th, the Cornelius Police Department posted on Facebook, quote, "We are seeking first-hand eyewitness information from anyone who may have seen this Toyota Prius or white female in the Madison County area between the dates of November 22nd and December 15th, 2022, end quote. Law enforcement sources claimed that a Madison County Sheriff's Office deputy came into contact with Diana Cojocari on U.S. Highway 25 near Lonesome Mountain Road, apparently at a pull-off area, but they gave no further details about what exactly that means. How did this police officer come in contact with her? Did he pull her over for speeding? Did he pull over and check on her because she was already pulled over and that was suspicious to him and he wanted to make sure that she was okay? Because this is a very, very isolated area. From this Google Earth video, we can see that the area surrounding Lonesome Mountain Road is very dense with trees. It's literally in the mountains. And although there are some residences sprinkled about, it's pretty much, like I said, in the middle of nowhere, incredibly isolated. It would be a great place to hide a body or to hide evidence, if you ask me. Well, law enforcement has now taken the search to Madison County, which is 2.5 hours away from Charlotte, and they began asking questions there. Someone who lives out there actually posted on the Cornelius Police Facebook page saying that if the Prius was a green or a seafoam green color, they think they saw that car, Diana Cojocari's car, beside a stoplight in Weaversville heading north on November 22nd. This person said they remember the car because of its distinctive color, and from the photo of Diana's Prius, it does appear to be green tinged. It definitely does. Prius has a color called sea glass pearl that is greenish. It's beautiful. Honestly, if I was going to drive a Prius, that would be the color I would choose. And I imagine in that isolated area, seeing a Prius in general in the Appalachian Mountains might be, taking somebody aback. And then to see that distinctive color would also, make somebody remember that. And if that's true, then we have Diana Cojocari in this incredibly isolated area the day after her daughter was last seen alive. And I guess the question would be, what was she doing out that way? Was she giving herself an alibi? Because she does appear to have taken selfies while in the area. The police posted 2 selfie-looking pictures with trees and mountains in the back. So is that what she was doing, building an alibi? Did she get herself pulled over purposely by the police so that she would have an alibi? Was she acting as a red herring, knowing that her movements would soon send police on a wild goose chase literally in the mountains while her husband drove Madalina to Michigan or wherever he truly went? And I'm sure the police have already checked to see if Christopher Palmiter went to Michigan. Allegedly, he does have family there. It does look like he grew up there. And if he went there to get some items or to recover some things from his family home, you'd think that somebody there, like his family members, would know that. Like he would have hit them up while he was in town, or maybe he's getting items from a house that people live in. So I'm sure the police have already checked to see if Christopher Palmiter went to Michigan. And I have a sneaking suspicion that he actually did. We just don't know if it was on the 24th, as Madalina Cojocari said, or the 23rd, which is what Christopher Palmiter said. Something about this doesn't add up. Like, a lot about this doesn't add up. And I know that we're missing a big part of the context, but there is a hope in me that Madalina is alive. You know, I know this is maybe stupid and maybe like naive, but Madalina Cojocari did say she was afraid of upsetting her husband, and she was afraid that her husband had hurt her family. Maybe she was abused. Maybe Madalina Cojocari was abused, and maybe Christopher Palmiter was abusing Madalina, and Diana couldn't have that happen, and so she hid her away or something, you know? Because from what I can tell, and like I said, I might be being naive, I might just be having false hope, but what I can tell is that Diana seemed to be like a good mom, like a loving mom. She's not like a Casey Anthony or, you know, like a Lori Vallow, at least from what I can tell. 8 years ago, a video was uploaded to YouTube which featured an episode from a Moldovan weight loss series, and Diana was featured in this episode, as is a little 3-year-old girl who, you know, as it turns out, was Madalina.
Următoarea participantă, Diana Cojocari. Instructorul Olga Krasneanskaya, filiala Star Studio. Felicitări! Felicitări!
Sunt Diana Cojocari, am 29 de ani și 87 de kilograme. La 22 de ani am fost căsătorită, dar din păcate am divorțat. Apoi a urmat un concubinaj din care am rămas cu un copil de 3 ani și din păcate nu a mers nici această relație. Și acum vreau să-mi reiau viața de la capăt, să încep o viață nouă, cu forțe noi, să-mi readuc aminte de cum eram mai tânără și mai încrezută în forțele proprii. Greutatea care o am acum e chiar supărătoare și dă bătăi de cap, începând cu garderoba și terminând cu probleme de sănătate, și aș vrea să scap de ele cât mai curând, să mă reangajez, să devin o mămică fericită și sper să încep o relație nouă cu un nou partener de viață. Am toate șansele să o fac, dar vreau să fiu în forma necesară. Zonele problematice care mă supără cel mai mult sunt burta, fesele, coapsele, deci...
So watching Diana interact with adorable 3-year-old Madalina, it's hard to imagine that a woman who could be so sweet and gentle with her daughter and seem to be very attentive and loving, that she could ever do anything to hurt her child. It's even hard to believe that she could know that Madalina was hurt or know that Madalina was potentially in danger and not do anything about it, like call the police. And obviously that video is not in English, but from what I gathered from like the context and stuff, Diana is saying that she used to be thin and then she gained weight, and now she's getting married and she wants to take that weight off. And I assume that she means she's getting married to Christopher Palmiter, which brings up another question, right? How does a 30-something single mother from Moldova get herself hooked up with an older man from Michigan? Like, how did they meet? How did that happen? And what did he offer her that, you know, was enough of a trade-off for her to tie herself to him for life? Like, I feel like I'm being rude, but he's like an older dude, and he's not like Brad Pitt older dude. He's not George Clooney older dude. You know what I mean? He's like Michigan older dude. According to Romanian investigative journalist Isofina Pascal, Diana's family are well-known and well-connected musicians in Moldova. Pascal also claimed that Diana and Christopher Palmiter did not know each other before their engagement, saying, quote, "This was all abrupt and sudden. You meet a guy online, he's like 40 years older than you, he comes to Moldova, you suddenly get engaged," end quote. I don't know if Isofina Pascal was being hyperbolic, but Christopher Palmiter was not 40 years older than Diana. He's like 23 years older than her, which is still like a big age gap, I think, but definitely not 40 years older than her. So, I've been watching the new season of Love is Blind. It is kind of like my guilty pleasure. I watch it when I'm putting my makeup on, and it just lets me like relax. And yeah, do I think that becoming engaged to somebody sight unseen without meeting them, without seeing if you connect in person, without seeing if, subtle things like their smell or their mannerisms or, the way they sleep, things like that aren't going to be a deal breaker. I think it's almost impossible to just meet somebody and sight unseen, marry them and have a happy marriage. And, there are people who have suggested this was like a mail order bride situation. And, although I wish and I hope that that's not what happened here. When I Googled Moldova mail order brides, a lot of search results came up, like Moldovan brides, what makes them unique? Moldova is a small country in Eastern Europe, bordered by Ukraine to the north, east, and south, and Romania to the west. The country has a population of 3.5 million people, with 1.5 million of the population being women. Because of the popularity of Ukrainian and Romanian women among foreign men, Moldova brides are often overlooked. This is an oversight, as Moldovan women can compete with their Eastern counterparts for the title of Best Brides in Europe. Moldova is an independent republic following the fall of the Soviet Union. Visitors love the architectural treasures of Moldova, its rich cultural heritage, and Moldovan girls. It's one of the poorest countries in Europe, but has a rich history and culinary traditions. And it literally says, find your bride. Vasilisa, 29, from Bender, Moldova. She's a lighting designer. She loves Bollywood movies. When they start singing out all of a sudden, I can have my pieces of pizza. But it's not so cool to watch these movies with the sole companionship of my pizza. Okay, so she wants somebody to eat pizza with her and watch Bollywood movies. Moldovan brides, who are they? Average cost of Moldovan bride is $2,000 to $9,000. That's it. Average age of marriage for Moldovan women, 24. Best website for finding brides from Moldova, Bravo date, and success rate, 88%. Oh. All right, Moldovan brides, who are they? Moldova brides make up almost half of Moldova's population. They have discriminated against Moldovan women in the past, hence women couldn't play a significant role in their country's history. However, these women have made strides for equality, but the men marginalize them still. Yeah, and you selling them off doesn't marginalize them at all. It's perfectly normal. Despite the odds stacked against brides from Moldova, these women are ready to start meaningful relationships with tolerant and intelligent European or foreign men. Moldovan girls are beautiful, and some of them work in show business. Some are singers, while others are models. Yet few of them have got their name on renowned TV screens or magazines. So what? Marry this woman, bring her to the U.S. so she can go to Hollywood and make it? Mail-order Moldova brides have complex characters and a lot of positive traits. The beauty of Moldova mail-order brides is striking. That's true, they're gorgeous, which makes them have a lot of potential suitors. Their beauty is captivating and will leave you admiring them even after meeting them for a long time. A Moldova bride has strong features: tanned skin, dark eyes with arching eyebrows, black curly hair, and plump lips. Moldovan mail-order brides are not so conservative with their style, as you will often see them flaunting their best body features. If you've dated any Western lady before, you know they dislike spending time at home. European and American girls are always on the lookout for extra trips and hobbies. They love exploring new locations, restaurants, and bars with friends, which can be fun, of course, but tiring as well. So don't date those American women who want to go out and have fun and live their life and travel and see the world. You should marry a Moldovan woman who will do whatever you want, even if that means staying home chained to the stove. Is that what I heard? Yep. This is something you would not experience with Moldovan brides. These women are happiest at home and enjoy spending time with their loved ones the most. Moldovan women are ambitious and hardworking by nature. They do not allow their background to define them. Rather, they rise above their circumstances and work their way to success. Moldovan wedding traditions. One surprising thing about marrying a Moldovan woman is that most Moldovan weddings are celebrated in the fall. The first reason is because of the church. Churches in Moldova have a period they keep for fast, and during this period, it's allowed to have parties. The second reason is they produce Moldovan homemade wines during fall, and it's difficult to have a Moldovan wedding without their homemade wine. Another interesting wedding ritual in Moldova is the stealing of the bride. If you're marrying a Moldova bride, during the wedding party, someone from the guest steals the bride. Once the groom takes his eyes off a bride, she's escorted out of the wedding ceremony. To get his bride back, the groom has to pay some money. Yet most times the groom won't get his bride back after paying the amount stated. Marriage in Moldova is unique, and the engagements are through the families of the bride and the groom. After the engagement, the groom finds 2 or 3 men to act as witnesses for his proposal to his bride. Afterward, the witnesses guard the bride until her wedding day arrives. These men promise to carry out her last wish if she dies before her wedding day. What? Moldovan girls are hardworking, strong, and mostly in charge of their homes. Moldova mail-order brides make splendid wives because they value family and know how to deal with difficulties. Brides from Moldovan are gorgeous and feminine, but susceptible to changes. A Moldovan bride is a girl who's very positive and loves her family and her friends. Gorgeous appearance. Because of their long history, Moldova is a pot of genetics, and most times they favor Moldovan women for marriage. It's almost impossible to describe the beauty of a Moldova mail-order bride in a few sentences. We can say one thing with confidence. Whatever you're looking for in a Moldova woman for marriage, you will find in a Moldova bride. Moldova mail-order brides are effortlessly charming and warm. They can easily maintain a conversation when you meet them, and they might likely want to develop the relationship further. If you're not confident in leading conversations, find yourself a Moldova bride. They make it easy for men to talk to them, and you'll appreciate talking to her. So, like a geisha. Homemaking skills. Because of their strong traditional values, Moldovan women for marriage make household duties for priority and rarely ask the man for help. This doesn't mean that a Moldovan bride won't ask for help. In most cases, she will get the job done on her own. Moldovan mail-order brides have an excellent taste for furniture, interior, and house decoration. That means your house is about to change once you decide to date Moldovan women for marriage. So is it possible that Madalina Cojocari was a mail-order bride and she met Christopher Palmiter online? So, saying mail-order bride is something that I think people might have a problem with, but there's all these websites that say, meet Moldovan girl for marriage online 2023. So you would meet online. But here's the thing. If Diana already had Madalina when she was going to marry Christopher Palmiter, if Madalina was already 3, that means that Madalina has a biological father out there somewhere. Where is he? Is he in Moldova? There's something going on that doesn't add up. The best case scenario for me is that maybe Christopher Palmiter was abusive or something, whether it's verbally or physically, emotionally, sexually. And so Diana secreted her daughter away while he was out of town in Michigan. And maybe she's hiding Madalina somewhere. Maybe she sent her to Moldova. Maybe she was able to get, fake passports or something like that, because the police would have already checked to see if Madalina left the country on her passport or if there was a ticket bought under her name. So maybe she was able to get a fake passport from somebody in her family. I mean, just from the last video that we talked about, Anna Walsh, where we were talking about that apartment building that she managed and how those 2 guys were caught pretending to be federal agents, and they had all of these identification making machines for passport photos and stuff. It's not crazy. It's not impossible. If you know who to talk to and you have the resources, it's pretty easy to get a fake passport. I don't want to say pretty easy, because there's going to be people who are like, oh my God, it's not easy. Have you ever done it? No, but I know that it's possible, right? If you want it bad enough, it's quite possible. And if you know where to go, it's quite possible. It happens all the time. So, maybe that's why Diana said she called her family in Moldova and they told her to report Madalina missing, but she still didn't. And then nobody from Moldova called the police themselves in North Carolina and reported her missing, because maybe the family in Moldova has Madalina. Maybe Diana Cojocari found one of those underground systems or underground organizations that help hide children who are victims of domestic violence or of sexual abuse. And maybe Madalina is there. But, then my question would be, why didn't Diana tell this to the police, once they have her in custody? Because I guess at that point, she couldn't be sure that they wouldn't release Christopher Palmiter, because if that's the case, he hasn't done anything wrong, technically, right? He hasn't done anything wrong that he could still be in prison for. He didn't kidnap Madalina. He didn't kill Madalina. So they'd probably release him and be like, we can rearrest him for domestic violence if you want, but if you don't have evidence, like, it's going to be hard to prove, and somebody's going to have to leave the house. You can get, like, a restraining order on him, but whose name is the house under? I have a sneaking suspicion it's Christopher Palmiter's, and we know that one of the main reasons women don't leave domestic violence situations is because they have nowhere to go. They don't have their own money. They don't have any say about whether or not their name's on the house. They don't have their own bank accounts. Their cell phones are on their husband's cell phone plan, so he can shut it off and leave her completely stranded. The car is probably under Christopher Palmiter's name. You know, when you get stuck in a corner like that, there's very little you can do. And maybe Diana just wanted to get her daughter out of there, knowing that, you know, she still had to stay and be a victim. But as long as she could get Madalina out of there, she could handle everything else as it followed. But here's, you know, some strange things. It does appear that Diana Cojocari and Christopher Palmiter are working together. The neighbors saw members of Madalina's family burning couch cushions and stuff in the yard. Well, when they say that, do they mean Christopher Palmiter and Diana? They said members of Madalina's family. So I would assume that meant more than one person. Were they both burning that stuff together? Because then you're hiding evidence. What are you hiding evidence of? What is there to hide evidence of? What happened that you need to now burn things so that nobody sees it? That's the concerning part for me. And we have both Diana and Christopher Palmiter taking trips after Madalina's last scene, right? So Diana's driving to, like, the mountains of North Carolina, reportedly the day after Madalina's last scene, and Christopher Palmiter is driving to Michigan, which is like a long drive, by the way, from North Carolina to Michigan. I feel like that's a long drive. He's driving to Michigan within a couple of days after Madalina goes missing. So why did they do that? You know, why did they do that? I have a sneaking suspicion that if something did happen to Madalina, she or her body was in one of these vehicles, depending on which direction they went, whether she was with Christopher Palmiter heading towards Michigan or she was with her mother, Diana Cojocari, heading to, you know, these incredibly isolated mountain ranges where you could hide a body and nobody would be able to find it because they'd have to search forever. So it's concerning. Those things are suspicious. It looks like you're trying to cover your tracks. It looks like you're trying to hide evidence. It looks like you're trying to, you know, throw a bunch of red herrings to distract law enforcement from what really happened. So in that sense, it does feel like, you know, Diana and Christopher Palmiter are working together. They're orchestrating this. It does feel like that in some sense of the word. But I've got to wait for more information to come out before I completely throw the book at Diana Cojocari at this point. Like, I think it's completely wrong that she didn't report her daughter missing. Of course, you know how I feel about that. But if she didn't report her missing because she knew she was safe and she wanted to make sure that Madalina could get far away and could be completely safe before anybody realized she was gone, then that makes sense to me. It's just a hard one to wrap my head around. I don't know how I feel, but a lot of people have been asking me to cover this, and specifically because Madalina is still missing. So from what I can tell, Diana Cojocari and Christopher Palmiter are scheduled to appear at court again on March 2nd. Meanwhile, last week, the Cornelius Police Department issued a statement thanking the community for spreading information about Madalina's disappearance on social media and saying, quote, "We still need your assistance in continuing to flood the area with her precious face." And honestly, that's what, you know, we're going to do now. Hopefully, share this video if you think it's worth sharing. And if you happen to know something about Madalina's disappearance or her life or something about her at all that could help the police, I have a number for you to call. Madalina Cojocari's date of birth is April 11th, 2011. She has brown hair, brown eyes. She's about 4'10" and weighed 90 pounds. If you have any information concerning the whereabouts of Madalina Cojocari, please contact the Cornelius Police Department at 704-892-7773. You may also contact your local FBI office, the nearest American embassy or consulate, or you can submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. I am still holding out hope that Madalina is okay. Everything has been redacted, so we don't know if they found the presence of blood in that home. I would hope that if they had found the presence of blood in that home, they would have released that or let us know in some way, shape, or form. But either way, I'm hoping that they didn't, and I'm hoping that she's alive because she's 11, man. Like, she's so freaking cute. I don't even know anything about her. Like, usually I like to give stories about these missing kids, these victims. I like to tell you who they were. I want you to feel connected to them. But because the only relatives it appears she has are in Moldova, Christopher Palmiter's family hasn't spoken out, and her mother, the person who would talk about her, is in prison for not reporting her missing. There's really nobody to tell us who Madalina was. But I know that she was a 6th grader. She is beautiful. She looks happy. She's the same age as my son, and it tears my heart apart to know that she may have been hurt at the hands of the people that she trusted the most. Or maybe that she's with somebody who means her harm, or maybe she's with somebody who doesn't have her best intentions at heart. There were suggestions that she could have run away because her book bag was missing and some clothes were missing, but for me, in my opinion, I think that was just another sort of like setting up the scene. Like, her book bag's missing and some of her clothes are gone. I don't see why she would just leave, and she would have been spotted by now. She would have been spotted somewhere, right? She would have been seen by neighbors walking, or she would have been seen getting on a bus, or, on store surveillance. She doesn't have a phone. She doesn't have money. She's 11. It doesn't make a lot of sense that she would have just walked out and left. But I will say that if they don't have more evidence than what we've already heard, it's likely that these two people, Madalina Cojocari and Christopher Palmiter, could not face any charges. Like, if there's no sign that a violent attack happened or that there was blood spilled in that house and they can't find any physical evidence, I don't think they bring them to trial. I don't think that they try to push them or push murder charges or anything on them like that. And that is concerning. And we see this a lot in cases of missing children, because there's always that chance, right, that the child walked off, that the child ran away. But then, where is the child? She would have had to have popped up at some point. That's what I keep thinking. It's very tough. So like this video if you liked it. Share if it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get notified every time I post a new true crime video. Don't forget to follow me on social media, Instagram and Twitter. My handles are in the description box. So are the links to my podcast, Crime Weekly, that I co-host every week with retired police detective Derek Levasseur, who's also a Big Brother winner. So he's always got lots of interesting stories. But we cover a new true crime case every couple of weeks or so. We cover a case every week, but it's usually the same one because we do deep dives. So you can listen to Crime Weekly wherever you listen to your audio podcast. We also have a YouTube channel. So the audio podcast goes up on a Friday, and then the YouTube video goes up on a Sunday, so that you can watch or listen, or both. You can do both. So check Crime Weekly out. Also, don't forget to check out my coffee, Criminal Coffee, which is the coffee you see me making at the beginning of every Coffee and Crime Time. It is the best coffee in the world, if I do say so myself. It is not just because it's my company, because it wouldn't be my coffee if I didn't think it was the absolute best coffee I've ever tasted. So try that out. Link is also in the description box. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I know it was a shorter one, but I wanted to get her name out, her story out, her face out, so that if there's anybody listening who hasn't heard about this case, because it really hasn't hit the news cycle as much as I'd like to see it hit the news cycle. So if there's anybody out there who hasn't seen her story, who didn't know she was missing, and who knows something, please, if you see something, say something. Thank you so much. I'll see you very soon. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe. Until next time, bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep. The mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name. Better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's killing you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood.